Hi, Matt. Now, for those of you that are familiar with this, you know that he's the shoeless therapist. And
Yeah.
so he always has to show us his socks, which are always amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if I've shown you these before. I actually wondered this morning. I don't think I have, but these ones are
Oh, no, I
llamas
have not seen those. Those are adorable.
or alpacas. I would assume llamas though.
I'm not sophisticated enough to be able to tell the difference, but I like them and I love the colors. Those are
No,
so
the
all of
colors
that
are a lot
works.
of no, it's actually funny because I'm not sure I can tell the difference between llamas and alpacas, but I have friends that are like, they're alpacas, not llamas. I'm like, oh, okay.
You should say my right foot is alpacas and my left foot is llamas. Got it covered. So
I'm I'm
exactly.
diverse,
Multi-species. Yeah, there you go.
multi-species diverse. Yeah, I don't know
There
how
you
else
go.
to say that.
There you go. So, what
Uh,
do you have for a topic for us today?
that is a good question. So I was thinking about um, talking about needs. And I've brought this up in multiple ways. And to be honest, like, it's not my goal to stir up controversy, but it's unfortunate because so often when there is compulsivity in a relationship, um, in essence, both people are not getting their needs met relationally, often individually. Um, and what I've found is that I have to go in and teach people how to get their needs met. Now, one of the ways we learn to get needs met are by setting boundaries and boundaries, if you understand them, are actually needs. That's really what a boundary is. It's a need, and it's need fulfillment. The problem is if we're not good at getting our needs met, we're not good at letting other people know what our needs are, then a lot of times our boundaries end up looking like we're controlling other people or punishing somebody, and that doesn't really work. And if we're going to learn as a couple how to meet each other's needs, we realize that we both still have an abundance of needs. So the partner who's been compulsive often feels like, okay, I can't have any needs. I've caused all this damage in the relationship, so I'm just going to figure out how to put my needs somewhere else while I learn how to do recovery, and let me show up and take care of the needs of the partner. Now, I know very clearly that there are some people who are like, I don't really care. I'm going to get my needs met no matter what. Even, so there are lots of variables. Um, Partners oftentimes feel like they've been giving up their needs for so long, and they're discovering this amazing idea that, wait, I deserve to get my needs met. This feels fantastic, if they even allow themselves to do it. Um, but we have a certain category of needs that are relational, and we can't get them met unless we're in a relationship. Now, don't get confused. Relational needs aren't only supposed to be met in your primary relationship. That's why we often recommend that when people are learning to get into recovery, to spread their relational needs out, build as much of a positive support system as you can of uh, other men and women that are like-minded, that are promoting recovery or even healthy living. Sometimes we grab, oh, I'm in the 12-step world, I'm in the recovery world, and that's our only friendships. And I actually think it's really healthy to be like, hey, I need healthy friendships from people at church. I need healthy friendships from people in the PTA, whatever it might be. Like, find as many groups of healthy people as you can find and bring them into your support system, because your life goal should not be to be in recovery forever, if that makes any sense. So where are all the places I can find healthy people to get my relational needs met? Now, what distinguishes relational needs versus maybe an individual need is that the need can only be met in a relationship. So vulnerability, for instance, it's hard to be vulnerable, maybe not impossible, but hard to be vulnerable with just yourself. Yeah, usually you need another person to be vulnerable with, or emotional connection, right? We need another person to have emotional connection with, intimacy and honesty, right? Like trust, right? This is why it's so difficult when we are trying to get these needs met, especially if our relationship, if our primary relationship, our partner relationship hasn't had any trust, and we realize, oh my gosh, even if I knew there wasn't a lot of trust, but I didn't find out until D-Day, Discovery Day, why there isn't any trust. Well, we still have to figure out how to have a mutual trust. Safety and security. If one person is using the finances for leverage, if you will, well, there's not a lot of security there. There's not a lot of safety there. So we have to learn how to meet needs for each other in the relationship. If I keep going, a feeling of belonging and acceptance, you're only going to get that with other people. So why I distinguish it is sometimes people will say, well, my self-worth is low because my spouse doesn't trust me. And I'll push and say, no, like your self-worth is low because you haven't learned self-worth. Yes, your spouse not trusting you may be negatively impacting your self-worth because that's where you put it. And so if I find out that somebody doesn't trust me, because that's not going to impact my self-worth for the most part, but if suddenly all my friends and family come to me and they're like, we don't trust you, then that might affect my self-worth, because I might be going, well, what is going on in my life that all these people don't trust me? But if it's one person, hey, I don't like that. That feels weird. Why don't they trust me? But self-worth can't be put into a relational category. It's self-worth, it's self-esteem for a reason. It's not other esteem, other worth. So when we really start diving into relational needs, we start understanding love and affection, being known without judgment, healthy supportive touch, boundaries and respect. And we start having to figure out, what needs do I have? And then you and I may have the same needs, but the way that we get those needs met are really different. I remember a client one time telling me that I didn't respect them because I was 10 minutes, 15 minutes late to every session they had. Now, I can make excuses all day long. I knew at that point in my career, I couldn't be on time to save my own life. Like, it just wasn't happening. I've learned to be a lot better, but at the time, I was like, oh, I can see that me not being on time feels really disrespectful to you. I'm so glad you're telling me, right? Like, I don't know that I could have changed it. I didn't change it. But if if someone was late with me in real life, I didn't take it as disrespectful. It was something, my need was different. Being some of that's probably my ADHD and my time blindness, because I'm like, I work really hard to make sure I'm on here at 2:30, no later, because I'm trying not to have time blindness. And I get distracted in 10 different things. But I also can realize, oh, I can see how that is respect, and that would maybe feel like disrespect. If Tammy every week is texting me going, Matt, are you coming today? Where are you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can see why that's disrespectful. So I can appreciate that my need might be different. But all of these needs are relational oriented, because yes, you can have self-respect, but respect within relationships requires another person. And if we look at it, to be valued, or to value someone else. Forgiveness. Although I think there is self-forgiveness, forgiveness is often a relational need. And so that's one that can be kind of tough. I think a lot of times people who have had compulsive behaviors are like, when are you ever going to forgive me? And I actually think that's a legitimate need. Now, at the same time, I think it's more important to ask, what do you think is preventing you from forgiving me? I might actually find out more about what my partner is experiencing. So rather than demanding forgiveness, hey, I realize forgiveness takes a long time. And there might be things that we're still discovering about each other, about maybe the harms that I've created. And so if forgiveness doesn't happen right away, I understand, but what does forgiveness, the path of forgiveness look like? What things have you forgiven me for? What things are you have you not yet forgiven me for? Right now we're having a conversation about not only my need to be forgiven, but your struggle in your need to forgive. um, the ability to change is actually a relational need. Attention and presence, fun and laughter is a relational need. Giving and receiving, so that this is a mutual exchange in our relationship, not just one of us giving all the time. So I think if I just thought it would be fun to talk about needs today and how important they are relationally. But let me just real quick touch on needs are scary. Like, I remember being a kid thinking, I can't wait to grow up and be an adult because in my brain, I won't have needs anymore. I'm going to grow up and you might not relate to this at all, but in my head, it was like, because I won't have to rely on somebody else for a ride to school. I can drive myself and I won't have to if I'm lonely, I don't have any restrictions. I can just go have all the friends I want, right? Like, this was my childish brain thinking, man, being adult must be fantastic because I won't have needs. The and being a kid, there's a natural position of being vulnerable. I'm at the mercy of my caretakers, and the older and older I get, the less at the mercy of my caretakers I am, except that the older and older I get, the more I actually have to figure out how to take care of myself. Well, that's a whole separate bucket of needs. And so I think it's important, like, to realize though that needs make us vulnerable, and as we get older, I believe at this point it's more vulnerable as an adult to have needs than it is as a kid. People look at a child and expect that child to have needs, right? People will see a child on the street and if they're, I'll just make this up, not wearing, or they look really tattered and they look lost, right? They'll call the police and like get social services involved to figure out, like, how do we help this kid? Kids aren't supposed to take care of themselves. Whereas an adult, it's more vulnerable because, well, what's wrong with me? I'm the same adult on the street tattered. Nobody's calling 911 to get me help. They're like, oh, look at that homeless guy. I wonder what he screwed up in his life that ended up making him homeless. Right? Like, there's this weird space where having needs as an adult, in my opinion, is more vulnerable than having needs as a kid. Now, that could be argued, but I just want everyone to think a little bit about that concept of the vulnerability of having needs. Now, as couples, this is where it gets really tough because when we get into recovery work, we both start getting tuned in to our needs. And just because one person is struggling with a compulsivity, just because one person who's struggling with a compulsivity might have caused greater damage or pain in a relationship, doesn't mean that their needs are any less. but it doesn't mean that the other partner's needs aren't any less either. In some ways, they're like, I'm starving. I've been taking care of your needs for so long. Now I have a reason why you need to show up for me. Well, as couples, we have to figure out through this process how to meet each other's needs. And when I talk to couples, I will often say one of the biggest difficulties is a sense of equality in a relationship when there has been betrayal. Because whether it doesn't feel like equality should exist, or right, because it's not fair because of all the injustice that's occurred, we still have to figure out long term, how do we restore balance so we're both showing up for each other? That is not an easy process, and it's especially vulnerable, I think, for both partners early in recovery. Am I even allowed to have needs? A lot of times we're so poorly versed in the way to talk about our needs that we put it out there as demands. We put it out there as like threats. But all we're really trying to do is say, hey, I'm lonely. Hey, I'm struggling. Hey, I'm hurting. So, Tammy, I don't know. What are your thoughts? All the places we could go with this.
Oh, yeah, lots of thoughts. So when you, I got lots of notes, of course. So you talked about the life goal of recovery is not this, and I thought it's not the sole focus, but yeah, I have a lifelong goal of recovery. So, but it isn't the all-consuming, yeah, because I thought I could feel the,
Yeah.
from those joining. So
I can
I like,
clarify that if needed.
yeah, yeah, it was
You want me to
just,
clarify?
yes, please, yes,
Yeah, what I meant was it doesn't mean, if you think about the concept of recovery, recovery in the big picture is healthy living. And so if I were to say to somebody, all of our friends shouldn't come from recovery circles, I mean that more like narrowly, as in I can only get friends from 12 step. But if I look at it, I'm in recovery for my own trauma. I'm in recovery from my own struggles in life. When I look at it, I really only want people who are in healthy living in my life. So the idea that the only people who are in healthy living are at 12 step is just kind of absurd. That's like saying the only place we can find healing is with a therapist. Well, therapists hopefully are helping lots of people find healing, but there are other places to also find healing. And so,
yes.
yeah, we need recovery the rest of our life, but I would change it to we need healthy living the rest of our life. Why would we ever want to go back to unhealthy living? That sounds terrible.
Well, yeah,
So,
unfortunately, some people quit doing the things that are helping them live in healthy living and choose to, yeah, I mean, like that's the challenge with an addict is like if we don't stay the course and
right,
continue to vision the path forward on a recovery path, on a healthy living path, then all of a sudden things start sneaking in. But I have lots of friends. I have my, yeah, and I know lots of amazing people, but 12 step is where broken people go to, to learn to do life differently. So yeah, I've
right,
got people in lots of different spheres and I value all of them. And, but I, just like you're saying, there are people that are toxic, and whatever they are, whether they're in 12 step or
right,
wherever I meet them, there are
right,
people that I will not let into my circle because they are not going to help me be on a healthy living. Now they may teach me some patience and tolerance and all of those things, but yeah,
uh,
and those are some family members that you have to deal with,
oh, totally,
but yeah,
totally.
yeah. And then you also were talking about um self-worth is low because, like, you use an example, my self-worth is low because my spouse doesn't trust me, and I'm like, well, you have to do things that are trustworthy, but it's also, you use the example of, well, if it's just one person, often it is the betrayed partner that is the one person, because there's this amazing facade out there for all these other people. But I hear what you're saying is like, if I'm getting that message from, like, I should be paying attention. And as a person in recovery, even if I hear it from one person, I'm going to at least take a look at it and go, am I not showing up in a way that, would be trustworthy? Is there something, that is there something about my behavior that is is reflecting negatively, and I can understand why that person would perceive that, and it may or may not be true.
Right. And it was more the, regardless of what it is, one thing can happen and it shouldn't take out a person's self-worth, because
Right.
their self-worth is this thing from inside that they've learned to develop, not from external sources, right? They've learned to recognize their intrinsic value. And so yeah, I was just using a quick, trying to think of something,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, no, I get it. And but an addict, starting at the starting place, we don't have self-worth, and that is what the recovery work is to build that. And then, yes, because we've been looking for external things, whether it's substances, sex, what, gaming, gambling, whatever it is, we've been
totally.
looking for other things to make us okay with ourselves, and that never works. There's never enough to fill the hole in the soul. So you're right. Once we have, and I can get some bumps and bruises to my self-esteem, and at the end of the day, it doesn't wipe out all the work that I've done. It gives me an opportunity to go, okay, I'm feeling a little vulnerable. I'm feeling a little hurt. And, I can go do the work I need to do for self-care so that my self-esteem is right-sized again.
Yeah. And it's tough, because that's part of the journey of everybody doing their own recovery for whatever it is how do I develop a greater self-worth instead of relying on my partner or somebody else to make me feel better about myself. Well, if you'd just forgive me, I'd feel better about myself. Well, that's not actually how it works, right? It might feel good to feel forgiven, but long term, that doesn't change your self-worth. So we all have to really get in and explore, where does my self-worth need work and how can I develop it, and not make it the responsibility of my partner.
So interestingly, this week we seem to have themes. So John Taylor's webinar yesterday, and he talked about lots of things, but one of the things he talked about was the short game versus the long game. And like it's easy, like you just said, like this will feel good in the moment, like, okay, I forgive you, and then we can go on. But if nothing's really changed, the long game is it's still going to continue to be a problem. So if we look at this as, like you said, it's healthy living, and what do I need to be on a healthy living path, then in the moment this may be a little more vulnerable and this may be a little more scary, but if it ultimately is bringing me closer in relationships, if I'm doing more esteemable things, then I'm going to feel better about myself. I'm going to have more self-esteem. I did think too, it was really interesting about your, and I do agree, needs are scary. I can't tell you how many guys I've had that have said, Thanos, the check-in, they don't like the end
Oh,
because it's needs, and the first time I heard that, I was like, we all have needs. But it's a vulnerability, and you're weak. You're weak if you are an adult male and you have needs. And
yeah,
and
there
I
is
think what a terrible message that we've given in our society, that it's weak to have needs. We have needs.
yeah. No, and that is something I've seen a lot. There are a lot of men out there that have been, one way or another, have been told that they aren't allowed to have needs, that if they were truly manly, truly masculine, they would be strong and have all their needs met, and they certainly don't want to share it with others, definitely not other men. And so the idea that somebody, if it's a man, for instance, who has had this compulsivity in the relationship for a long time and is now coming out of it, they're being deprived of the thing that, or they're depriving themselves of the thing that had been so fulfilling and yet unfulfilling at the same time, of getting their needs met. And now they're being told, well, we'll figure out healthy ways to do it. Well, that's why recovery, right, and sobriety often takes a lot of time, because to then, for the first time in their life, really start exploring what need fulfillment looks like and how to get it from other people as well, there's a lot of work there. Now, it's not to say that it shouldn't be done. Of course, it should be. It's what, if you will, should have been done since they were small. But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, that didn't happen.
Yes. And and it isn't going to be like magically overnight you're going to figure all of this out. So the incremental changes over time, but it also, like that is action that each partner can see in the other, that helps to build trust and helps to bridge the gap between the two. When I loved what you said of like, and I hear this a lot, why won't you forgive me? And it's kind of in that tone. And I love that you said, what is preventing you from forgiving me? Like I'm being curious and I'm asking a question. But I was also thinking you better be willing to hear the answer, like
Oh,
if
totally.
you're asking the question.
Oh, it's a scary question to ask because you might say something that really pokes at the heart of something that's painful to me.
Yes, so have a sponsor handy, for that. So, and the biggest challenge, the sense of equality, and I thought I like that. I see that play out a lot too with a betrayed partner going, no, like this has been horrible, and I deserve to have all my needs, and like it almost plays into where the addict's going like I can't have any needs, and the partner's going, you're darn right, like you're darn right, and so how do you find and I think it's also, I'd like to talk about this a bit. We would welcome your questions. Please type them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But
Yes.
like identifying needs, and I always think it's good to do, like you talked about having other people, and I think it's good to talk about, like, do these make sense? Whether it's a therapist or, sponsors or, support team or whatever, does this make sense, to identify as a need versus, and, like I want, so, thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really tough because people will be like, oh, that's just a want. That's just a want. And if I were to say that wants and needs are fairly synonymous, right? So let's say right now I'm
Hmm.
like, I want some food, right? Do I need food? Well, right in this moment, I want some. I'm hungry. Uh, but but honestly, I could probably go at least a day, if not several days without food before it becomes critical, right? And so we have to figure out, can I go without fun and laughter as a relational need? Yeah, I could probably. It's today it might just be a want. How long do I get deprived of that before that really turns into a critical need? And so all of those wants, when done healthily, are feeding the needs, and they allow the needs to not go into deficit.
Okay.
And my need for fun and laughter might be less than yours, Tammy. Like you might have a greater need for that. Whereas I'm like, no, once in a while it's really enjoyable, but I don't need it like you do. And so if I'm partnered with you and I realize how much you need it and I'm maybe not able to give it, well, then I'm like, how do I become a little more social so that Tammy can get her needs met of fun and laughter? And what type of people do we need to be friends with? Because I recognize that's a really important need of hers. Right. So
It-
when I always have to be a little bit careful because I think wants get a little bit of a bad rap. And let me give you an example that is, and again, I don't mean to be controversial, but it's a great example, I think. I will often tell people that if you look at it, and I don't know the truth here, I'm still exploring this as a concept, but I've said to people, what if sex isn't a need? You can go your whole life without it, right? Like, um, and some people would be like, well, it wouldn't be very enjoyable, right? And that's fine. But like conceptually, how do we define the sex as a need? But then when I sit and I talk with people and I work with them about sex and sexuality, okay, if it's not a need, which it may not be, what if it's one of the most incredible tools to express and receive human connection? And so, human connection, physical touch, affection, what if those are needs and sex happens to be a phenomenal tool to get it met? Because if we look at what point in a child's life is sex even appropriate? Right? There are
mhm.
unhealthy people who will take advantage of a child sexually and be like, well, it's an important need and they need to learn it. And I'm like, oh, cool. Guess what? You just traumatize them, you abuse them, and you're going to jail, right? I don't say that because that's not my job, but conceptually, right? So at some point it develops, okay, healthy affection is good for children, touch is good for children, right? Emotional and physical connection is good for children. And then at some point, sex becomes an appropriate tool that can actually help that adult feel all of those appropriate things. But then at the same time, sex can be used as a terrible tool to betray someone. Because if in our relational agreement, we've agreed not to be sexual outside of our relationship, and I do it, and I know that I'm doing it, and I don't tell you, and I exploit you by I exploit the trust in our relationship by keeping that information from you. Now sex has been used as a massive tool for hurt and pain. Well, do I want to be sexual when it's been used for hurt and pain? No. So how do we restore the trust in the relationship where that tool of sexual activity is now can be, hey, that's a want that fulfills a need. So I don't know if this has gone way too much off of a tangent, but I'm curious what your thoughts are as I kind of describe that want versus need.
It's really interesting, and I actually like the discussion, so we'll ponder that more. But yes, I hear lots of sex addicts, that are I need, I need sex, and I'm like, like not necessarily, and not for a time, yeah, and the hyper focus on anything, I guess with me, I always go, well, I want a really expensive sports car, but like, like, and so I kind of go to the, yeah, it's not a need, and so
Well,
finding
right.
the list, go ahead.
But if you think about it, okay, if we use the expensive sports car, you're right, it may not be a need, but you getting that expensive sports car and enjoying the heck out of it might actually fulfill a lot of needs for you. But we would need to understand the relationship. I don't need that thing. However, I actually think that it might help me fulfill actual needs. And I would say, hey, Tammy, if you can afford it, and you most likely, if you're like the rest of us humans, you're going to have to give up on some other wants in order to afford it. And it might be you're going to have to give up on time off. You're going to have to give up on, you're going to have to work more, whatever it might be, whatever it is to afford it, you're going to have to give up on some of those other wants and needs because you're going to allocate resources towards this one, the sports car. And if you said to me, that's totally worth it. Do you know how much I drive this thing? And I have so much fun in it. And me and my friends, there's lots of laughter and human connection because we go on these rides together. And I'm like, awesome. Now, but let's not, the car is not the need. The fulfillment that it gives you is the need. If in fact it gives you fulfillment, because lots of us will lie to ourselves. I need that sports car. And then we get it and we go, oh, crud. I didn't realize how expensive it was really going to be. I didn't realize how much the insurance was going to cost. I didn't realize how poor gas mileage it was. And that's costing me extra. And it breaks down more than other cars. And we go, oh, this is sucking all the needs, all the resources from my other needs. I got to get rid of it at a loss. So I think it's a great example of need fulfillment all over the place because, for instance, we've talked about it a bunch. I love biking. I bike all the time. It fulfills a lot of needs for me, but it won't for you, Tammy. You're not going to bike like I do and get your needs met. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, but the only way I've discovered how to get my needs met is through exploration. I got to try some things on. So I go to my wife and I say, "Hey, I'd like to buy another bike." And she's like, "Really? How come?" And I'm like, "Well, here's why." And we talk about it. And either I go, "You know what? All right, that's probably not the best idea," or I say, "All right, I'm going to go for it and I'll sell one of my other bikes or whatever it is." And I find out, did that ultimately meet a need or was I lying to myself? Did I deceive myself? And did I manipulate and deceive my partner in the process? Anyway, is that way too
But no,
much?
it's really good. And but I also like you talk to your wife about, like yeah,
Oh, totally.
yeah, no, but yeah, because well, like I mean, I hear lots of stuff and you do too, but it's like, well, I really needed that, whatever, that was. But it's again that external, like I love what you're talking about. Well, if the sports car, brings you joy because of all of these things, and not speeding tickets, which are problematic. But at the end of the day, if it was like, if it really was and it fit with my lifestyle, then all good. But it's also having the awareness that just because I have this is not going to make me the be all end all. And I've always been clear about that. Like I love a fine machine, I really do, and so I appreciate cars for that, and but it's not, well, if I have that, now I'm going to be, at some whatever, and I'm going to look cool and like whatever. Like I really understand, from that standpoint of like, there's not a thing out there that's going to make me okay. Again, going back to what we were talking about a bit ago with the hole in the soul, even the really lovely sports car is not going to fill the hole in my soul. Now, the bike stuff, I actually used to bike. I just
Oh,
don't do it. Yeah, yeah, bike trips and stuff like that. So, but
oh,
I
that's really
haven't,
cool.
yeah, and in a while, and it's changed. We've talked about paddleboarding. I love paddleboarding. Like I love paddleboarding. And have a nice one and have a nice paddle, and anyways, so I have the things that I need to be able to do what is something really meaningful to me, and I've gotten the value out of that because I do it, and I'm sure you do too with the bikes. It's like, it really is meaningful to me. It's not just another bike hanging in the garage looking cool, or I mean, it's not just stuff. It's
Right.
because of the joy that it brings. So I get that from that standpoint.
You bring up a good point. I can't, so let's say respect is,
Hmm.
and I would argue respect is a pretty important need for most people in a relationship. If I decide that I want to buy another bike and I don't talk to my wife about it, and keep in mind, it's because the bikes I buy are usually fairly expensive, and that's going to be different for everybody, but on what is expensive or not. But I definitely don't buy a bike at Walmart, right? Like that's so, and so I guess what I'm saying is, if I'm going to maintain respect in my relationship, I'm going to go to my wife and I'm going to have a conversation. Hey, I'm looking at this bike. I'm going to buy it. Here's why. Here's what I'm thinking. Like, let's talk. And it isn't even that I'm asking her permission. I'm going to her and saying, I want to have a conversation. I don't want her to come and ask me permission to buy something. I want her to come and talk to me about it. And let's have a conversation. And let's see if both of us go, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do this thing. Now, if I do that without talking to her, I may violate respect in the relationship. And my need for respect in the relationship might be a lot more important than whatever needs that thing would have been fulfilling for me. And I need to be aware of that. Every choice has a loss. Every choice I make has a loss and it has a gain. And if I value the respect in my relationship, then that's going to be more important to me than whatever that bike's going to give me. And so, but if you look at that concept, it's it's not about asking a spouse for permission. It's about what is it that is required in our relationship to have respect. I would argue there are some couples that maybe they're wealthy enough that if somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to go buy a $5,000 bike," I don't have to ask my spouse. And it's like, cool. That's awesome. Good for you guys. But I've seen plenty of wealthy people who still have a conversation about every bit of money over $100 that they're going to spend. Because what is it in your relationship that is needed in order to build trust? And so if you are a partner, whether you've been betrayed or you've done the betraying, you should be trying to figure out what gets the need fulfillment met in the relationship, not trying to convince your partner, well, I don't understand why I would need to check it in. We have plenty of money. Because it's not about money, it's about respect. Which things are we void of in our relationship? Is it respect? Well, then what things we're going to build respect? Is it forgiveness? What things are going to build forgiveness? Is it trust? What things are going to build trust? I am never going to try and convince my partner that their need isn't real because I don't agree with it. I'm going to be
Mhm.
trying to figure out, how do I meet your need? So, just a quick thought.
So, but tagging onto that, if like if you oh, let's go back to the time one. Like when I was in my active addiction, I was really lax with time. And so one of the things I had to change when I got into recovery was that, being punctual and all that. So it has become a thing for me. So just like that example you were talking about is, yeah, if somebody disrespected me time and again, in fact, I have a friend who shall go nameless, but like it's just known, like she's always late
Right.
for hiking, and so and it's frustrating, and like I've learned to let it go because I value her and the relationship, and it is not malicious, but I also feel like, you've got three other people that are waiting for you, so it feels disrespectful, like that, like you were sharing, about that. So bringing it back, you were just talking about, like, you don't value, just saying, you don't value that, like, somebody's need is like, I need you to be punctual. Like, how do you um how do you work on that, where you go, like, I think your need for being punctual is ridiculous, like if you, no, seriously, like if you were just going, I so don't understand, I have no concept of that, like, how do you rectify that and go, you know
Well,
uh,
in the case of my client, I actually told them, I said, honestly, as much as I can appreciate that, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that. Like, if you need me to give you a referral to another therapist who I know is really timely, I'll do that if it's that important to you. But I just very frankly told them that, unfortunately, and there's other reasons. It was my last appointment of the day every time. And so if I got late on one, it bumped the other. But if I'm being honest, that wasn't even it.
mm,
I would start my day 10 minutes late at times, with my first client. I mean, there were lots of reasons that I just hadn't figured out how to do that yet. And I think that my approach in that moment was the best that I could do, to say, I hear you and you have every right to need that. And if I'm not the right fit because of it, then let me help you find somebody who is. In that
but if
case,
it's a spouse, what, like, if the, like, we're talking, so take it one more, it's
okay.
different if it's a professional and service, whatever, but
Well,
now it's
no,
my
it's different
spouse and
because
there's a conflict with the needs, and, like, I think your need is ridiculous, like, I
right.
can't
Well,
understand that.
one, I'm gonna say we have to learn to be empathetic. If
Mm,
you think the need is ridiculous, you're not being empathetic. You need to actually say, I understand. You need to ask enough questions for you to get to the right place, to then say to your spouse, okay, you make sense to me now. Now, this is something that I teach a lot of people. You don't have to agree in order to be empathetic. So then I hear people say to me, well, then I agree to disagree. And I'm like, that's not empathy. Empathy is, I hear you, or I ask enough questions until I finally go, oh my gosh, you make sense to me. I don't see it the way you do, but now I see it the way you do. And then I have to figure out, I'm worried I can't meet that need for you. I hear you and you make sense to me. I can't meet that need. Now, if I were to blow this up in an extreme case, it might end the relationship in divorce. Like, there are times, like, if and I think this is a healthy conversation to have. Let's say we have sexual betrayal going on in a relationship, and we end up talking, hey, what are the chances of us actually having a monogamous relationship? And the person's like, I don't think I can ever do monogamy. And it's like, okay, so do we explore some sort of ethical non-monogamy, because you've been doing it unethically, right? And if I as a partner can't do that, and they are being honest and really going, I think that's what I need in my life, then it's like, okay, then do we end the
mm,
relationship? Right? Like, when you really boil it down, there are needs that I want met by my wife that she has told me I can't do that. And the truth is, I either have to learn to be okay with it or decide that the relationship needs to end. And I'm trying to think of something silly, but imagine um there are things like that all the time in relationships. If a partner says, hey, I need you to take your turn and do the dishes every other day, right? And one partner, as much as they might try, they just don't do it, and ultimately they say, I'm unwilling, right? Okay, so then is there something else we can do? I'll do the dishes every day, or we'll hire somebody to come do the dishes, like whatever it is. We have to figure out, if it's a non-negotiable need, we have to figure out how to get that need met for that person. And we all, I'll say it this way, even though I don't love it, we all make compromises on our needs. We're not married to any one person who meets all of our needs. In fact, I think that would be unhealthy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we do have to figure out what level of not getting our need met are we able to endure, and does it make it worth it to endure in our relationship? And if we get to a level where it's not worth it to endure, then typically that means you will end the relationship. And so many of you who are like, I can't do this, and I'm like, no, actually you are. You're doing this until you don't anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What you're saying to me is, I don't know how I can keep doing this. This feels overwhelming. And I'm like, yes, I can see why it's overwhelming. I can see why you're struggling to continue to do it. Either you decide you're done and end the relationship, or you figure out how to be okay with it, or figure out, some arrangement that works for both of you that goes, well, that eases it enough that I'm okay. I'll stay in this longer.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
did that make sense?
Yeah, no, it really does. And but I would, because you're like, yeah, you are in it until you choose not to be in it. So you are doing it. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that is the truth. And I think that's and it's easy to go, I can't handle this anymore, and I'm done, but if you're not willing to leave or change, then you continue on the same path. So it is challenging. My husband, I can't remember when, early in our marriage, uh, let's say I had a very sarcastic tongue. Like, I thought sarcasm was fun, and he finally looked at me and he said, and he said it with love, but he said, I can handle almost anything, but not your sarcasm. And like, it was this moment of like, I can either learn to change, or I'm going to lose this man who is like, I mean, I love him dearly. And I swear I probably had a bloodied tongue for a long time, while I was learning to clench down, because I mean, like, it was always like the first thing out was
Oh,
a sarcastic
to
comment.
make,
It was
yeah.
very tough to change. But I was like, but it was that moment of like, I mean, I knew he was serious. Like, I was like, I could lose this relationship over sarcasm, and sarcasm always has a bite to it. But I also, it was interesting because in working on that, I found that, because I was sarcastic with everybody, and it really shifted, like how I showed up in other relationships too. So it was not just isolated in that relationship. It was a pervasive change, which was honestly a good one. So
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it highlights a really important part. Like, the truth is, that every relationship we get in, from the moment we get into it, we're constantly figuring out, can I get my needs met, and can I change enough to get their needs met? And that's why I think one of the important needs within the relational category is a willingness to change. Because how important is this person to me? Am I willing to change in order to keep this person? And and if you aren't, then most likely the relationship's going to end, right? If that makes any
yeah,
sense.
no, it does. And it's challenging because, like, it's not at the complete sacrifice of all self, because then it just builds resentment. So what you're talking about is the dance of like, how do we both get our needs met the healthiest way possible, and making progress that is helpful for both of us. So, okay, question is, my SA husband used to go to the gym. After treatment, one of my boundaries was no gym. He would like to return to the gym. What questions should we be asking each other to work through this?
Such a good question. So I'm going to, this is something that I see a lot in recovery. And I would actually argue, it's going to sound funny, but your boundary was not no gym. That's not a boundary. That's you telling him what to do or not to do. Now, if I look at this, what is there is you were scared. You were nervous. You had lots of concern. And I would argue tons of legitimate reason. I don't even know the situation, but let's talk about it. Man, you go to the gym and there are lots of beautiful people working out, and lots of them don't love wearing clothes. And so they show off their bodies. And for somebody who struggles or experiences sexual compulsivity, like there's a lot of temptation there. And so that might be a question that I ask. Talk to me about the temptation you have at the gym. Do you have temptation at the gym, or is that my fear telling you what to do, even though the gym, it's not even about the gym? Because I've talked to people who they're like, honestly, the gym isn't triggering for me. It's just triggering for my spouse. So you don't go to the gym because it's, even though it's never been triggering for you. No, it hasn't. Now, I'm not suggesting that I'm throwing out an idea here to explore if this makes sense. So that would be a question. Talk to me about your temptations at the gym. If temptations were there, or acting out was there or whatever, talk to me about where you're at now. Why is it that you think going back there would be okay? I'm curious, are there any measures that you need to put in place to make the gym safe for you? And they might say, you know what? Yeah, that's why I'm only ever going to go with one of my buddies. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Now, again, I'm not telling them what the rules should be. I'm asking them what things about it suddenly make it that this thing that wasn't good, that we can now start putting this back into our lives. I just want to understand, what are your thought processes around it? Now, I get it. One thing that makes it very nerve-wracking for a partner is they're like, well, I don't know, I just want to go back to the gym. Well, what things are you going to do? I don't know. Okay, that's terrifying. Your lack of insight is what's scary to me. And that's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say, well, if you don't know, you can't go. No, your lack of insight is scary. I would imagine if the gym has been a place of difficulty for you, that you would have some thought around this. And the fact that you don't makes me nervous. So if you decide to go to the gym, I'm wondering, are you comfortable telling me if triggers come up? Well, no, I'm sick of telling you. Okay, well, okay, so you're going to go to the gym. You're not going to talk about triggers. And that's the other thing. As a spouse, do I want to know the triggers? Like, the truth is, sometimes I don't want to know if you get triggered. If you see somebody attractive at the gym, keep that to yourself and your recovery buddies, and just tell me if you cross the bottom line. In the meantime, this is your recovery. I hope you're doing good recovery, right? Like, there's this space where we've got to figure out how to let each other do our recovery. But these are all of kind of the questions and things that I would be exploring to try and figure out, what does this relationship need to look like around the gym? Now, if I were the husband, I might ask myself, hey, the gym is really important to me. Do we have a room in our house that we could dedicate to some gym equipment? Maybe I can work out at home. Or, I might explore some other ideas and other options. And maybe that's not enough for him. Maybe it's too expensive to have all the different equipment that he wants. Maybe he likes the social environment of the gym. All of these questions I'm going to be asking because I want to get curious. I might even ask, does it feel like I'm the only reason you don't go to the gym? Is it just because I told you no? Did you feel like it was good for you to have a break from the gym? What was that like? Why was it good to have a break from it? Right? Like I'm going to go through and just really start exploring all of that. But I can also realize that like the way that I'm answering that might be really scary for you to hear, because in some sense you're giving up control, and you're giving more freedom to him to potentially go back down a road of unhealthy behavior. But I'm gonna throw this out, and this is a very scary proposition. In a healthy recovery relationship, we are continuing to give each other more and more freedom so that we can both still be individual peoples, but we're also trying to peoples, I think that worked. But we're also trying to figure out how to show up for each other more as our freedom expands. Hey, I know I went to the gym today and that probably was scary for you. Anything you want to talk about while I was at the gym? Did you find yourself getting nervous? Did you find yourself wanting to come spy on me at the gym, right? Like I'm as the husband, I'm going to start asking those questions. What's it like that I've been going to the gym this week? Is there anything that would help you feel more comfortable? Whether or not I'm willing to do it, right? Well, keep me on FaceTime the whole time. Okay, I'm not sure that's going to work for me, right? Like, um, but I'm going to be having those conversations because if I'm a caring husband, I want to create as much safety for you as possible while I also learn to get my needs met in a healthy way. So, Tammy, any other thoughts? Like, I kind of went all over the place, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
trying
it
to
was really
kind of.
helpful. Yeah, I think I'd be curious. Like I think all of those questions were good, and I was thinking I would also be curious. What is it you're looking for when going back to the gym? And was there any behaviors in particular at that location? Is there another gym that would be a fresh start that could be an option? But like I think it's really one of those being really curious and having a conversation about it. Because and I think I mentioned a few minutes ago too. It's like an absolute no. Addicts, and I'm not blaming partners at all. I'm just saying, but then we get resentments about like, well, I can't do this because of whatever, and so it's like we have to own that we have an issue. We've lost our ability to do everything that we always thought we could do. But how can we learn to ask and have a conversation about, is there a healthy way to do this? What am I ultimately looking for? Like I do go to the gym, but I also go running, I go hiking, I do other things that are not at the gym, which are there other options to get the physical workout aspect
Right.
in that would feel like a safe option. So I love that you're saying addict partner. I'm going to ask you partner, like it the workout is important for me, and yes, can we brainstorm and come up with some ideas that I can get that goal met, that would help you feel comfortable with it. That to me it sounds like the most of a win for each of them, rather than it's like no no so
Right. And that takes a lot of vulnerability to do this, right? It takes a lot of risk and scary conversations and even just fear, as we both gain a healthy autonomy as we are working through recovery. And so this is not, I mean, this is actually a really difficult question because the answer is so varied depending on the needs of each couple and depending on the history. But I actually think it's a great example because every couple in recovery needs to be exploring these concepts. We both have needs. Sometimes they're competing needs. Sometimes my need is really triggering to you. Like, let's figure out how to explore this to create as much safety as possible while I also get my needs met.
Yeah, yeah, and if ultimately the goal is we want to be in this relationship and on a healthy path together, how do we navigate that? So, and the other thing is, an addict's recovery is their recovery, and like there's not enough bubble wrap to bubble wrap an addict up and make sure that they're always safe forever. And so yeah, the fear though for partners, and I get it, is like if I loosen the reins, if I'm not hanging on, what's going to happen, and is it going to come back and hurt me because that person's going to act out. So I get all of that. It is complicated, but and hopefully if there's a worst case, there's a misstep, there's a quick, oh my gosh, I wasn't ready, I thought I was. But even we talk about bookends, I know we're out of time too, but we talk about bookending. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to call my sponsor, and I'm committing to call my sponsor or peer support before and after every gym session, because I'm going to have accountability, and I'm going to have that I'm going to have that focus in my brain, my thinking part of my brain, of like, I'm going for a workout. I'm not going to objectify people, and then when I get done, I'm going to go, I did mostly good. I found myself having to use my 3 second, with one, but like that accountability, can help. So, but yeah, great question. And this is called the real life stuff that has to be navigated, when
Totally.
trying to do things differently. So, we are out of time. So next week we will not have a webinar. Debbie's gone, but see you in a couple of weeks. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.